Shane Walsh. Most people see him as a protagonist and villain of Season 1 and 2. But was he really a villain? Or was he just too far ahead of the times for the early days of the apocalypse? Let's lay everything down right before us, and you can decide for yourself. So how bad was Shane actually? Let's travel back to Season 1 and see who Shane actually was and what he became. Before the apocalypse, Shane was a partner of Rick Grimes for their local sheriff's department. Also prior to that, he was a longtime friend of Rick as well, going back to even high school. Right before the apocalypse, when Rick was shot and stuck in his coma, Shane stepped up to save Rick's family of Lori and Carl. He should also get some bonus points for giving us Judith as well. During this time when he was trying to get Lori and Carl to safety in Atlanta to wait for Rick to get transferred there, they found the Atlanta camp and stayed safe on the outskirts of the city. Truly believing that his best friend was dead, he started a relationship with Lori, which ultimately led to his demise in the end of Season 2. Rick returns from the dead and sends Shane spiraling down a dark path. The best part about Shane is we get to see his downfall right before us. Other villains like the Governor, the group at Terminus, the Saviors, or the Whisperers, we really only get a small glimpse at what made them who they were. Even with Rick, many believe if we had the perspective of those on the other side of his gun, we would see him as a villain, but that is for an upcoming video in itself. Back to Shane. Shane took a leader role in the Atlanta camp. Looking at the group, there was really no one that could oppose to this. One, he was a sheriff, which already put him above the normal population. Glenn later evolved into a good leader, but at this point he was just a supply runner and a pizza delivery guy. So when Rick returned, not only did he take Lori back, but Shane also took a shot to his ego in his leadership role as well. Even though Rick never took that main leader position until later on, Shane knew eventually it would happen. Shane was really black and white in the beginning, and people took more towards Rick's style of leadership over Shane's. Shane had a real, in-your-face aggressive nature about him, and he would do whatever it took to make sure those he cared about survived. This new world gave him an opportunity for a new start with a family. He grabbed a hold of this and ran with it. The fact that Rick came back and destroyed everything really changed Shane for the worst. In reality, Shane's biggest flaw was the fact that he would do anything to protect those he loved. He didn't want to build a better world. He was adapting to the world that they were given. At the end of the day, he didn't want to protect the whole group. He just knew that the more numbers, the more protection that they truly had. Shane just happened to only care for himself, Lori, and Carl, and anything that got in the way of that was an expendable asset, as seen with the death of Otis. Was he really wrong in doing this? If it meant the life or death of Carl, he didn't think so. It was just a few seasons too early for this thinking. Rick in Season 2 would have tried every other option to make sure him and Otis both made it back alive. Shane only cared that Carl lived, and it didn't matter who he had to sacrifice in order for that to happen. Now this brings us to the question, in the end, was Shane really wrong? Yes, the Lori situation and taking your best friend's wife as your own was not right. Even though Lori was willing and went along with it and even fueled the fire between Rick and Shane later on. In the end, Lori was his downfall, but if you eliminate Lori, was the view that Shane had on how to survive this harsh world actually wrong? Let me bring a few examples. Let's start with Carl and Otis. Yes, in any other circumstance, it was wrong to kill Otis, but if he felt like he had no other option, he needed to get back to save Carl, he did what he thought he had to do. This began to eat him up inside, and he never was able to recover from this decision. If he didn't make this decision, and they got killed at the school, Carl doesn't live either. That's 3 people dead instead of 1. That's the way that Shane viewed it. What about the walkers in the barn? Shane was aggressive and over about the whole situation. Rick wanted to follow the rules that Herschel laid down, and Shane felt like they needed to make sure they were protected. Was he really wrong? Well, first he took out the walkers in the barn, in turn finding Sophia in there as well. Because of Shane's decision, they were able to stop looking for her since she was already a walker. If he didn't, they probably would still be trying to find Sophia out in the woods in season 10. Eventually, the herd came through as well when they had to leave. Shane wanting to kill Randall just in case he went back to find his group so they could go back and take the farm. Would Randall have done this? Possibly not, but he was eliminating that chance. Remember, Rick gave Andrew a chance to survive in the prison yard. He didn't think that he would come back with revenge, which ultimately led to the death of T-Dog, and it truly led to the death of Lori as well. Early on, Shane had adopted the idea that you are either the butcher or the cattle. This was seasons before anyone else truly had this perspective. I honestly don't believe Shane was that bad of a person. If he never would have got with Lori, he never would have went down the dark path that led to his death. He had the right perspective of how to survive this new cold, dark world that Rick would eventually have as well, but he was about 5 seasons too early. I honestly don't think Shane was that bad, actually. Let me know down what you think in the comments below about Shane, if you think he was a true villain, or do you think he was just too early for his time with his perspective on how to survive this cold, dark world that was presented to them. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hit the subscribe button if you did, and the thumbs up as well. And I will talk to you guys all in that next video.